It is time to strike back against Iran, or at least so says the Wall Street Journal in an article published a couple of days ago by no less authorities than the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and the former Vice President of the United States Mike Pence. Now, if you're just reading the Wall Street Journal, which is one of the more credible outlets in the United States today, one of the top 3 or 4, I would say, and certainly when you hear something by a former Secretary of State or the last Vice President, that's going to get a lot of attention. People are going to go, "Wow, that must be really serious." But what they're not counting on is that there are shows like Daniel Davis Deep Dive that are going to call out BS. And that's about the nicest thing I can say about this article. I'm absolutely shocked at how inaccurate and deceptive this piece is and how potentially dangerous it is if American people believe what they're saying, because all it's going to do is get us sucked into another war if we listen to what these guys are saying. And I'm going to lay out some things here that hopefully will open some eyes and will show you just how thin and deceptive some of the commentary by some people that seem to like they have good credibility and good reputations are actually spilling out there in ways that are antithetical to Americans. Now, fortunately, you do have the Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and we're going to jump right into it now. This article just got me aggravated because right off the bat, they say escalating Iranian aggression cost the lives of 3 American soldiers in Jordan. These intolerable acts of violence by the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism can no longer go unpunished. The U.S. must respond with an immediate and unequivocal show of force that will begin to restore the deterrence that has decayed not only in the Middle East, but around the world. And that's what the 2 authors say there. And there is, first of all, the very first line there is just nonsense. Those troops were not killed because of our lack of deterrence. Everything goes back to, and this is going to be a theme throughout this article here, is it goes back to the Israel-Hamas war. And they don't want to talk about that. They want to pretend it doesn't. In fact, they're going to go to some effort here in a little bit in this article to try to claim that there's no relationship to it, which is just absurd at face value, even more absurd when you start digging into what's happening underneath and what people are saying and what's happening on the ground. And you know that Daniel Davis Deep Dive, we always talk about the reality and the truth on the ground. But it's not just Daniel Davis Deep Dive that's going to take these guys to task. It's their former boss, because he ran in 2016 on a platform to end stupid wars and to prevent other ones from coming out. And by the way, that was probably the deciding factor that led me to vote for him in 2016, because that resonated with me. Because as someone who fought in 4 combat deployments, I was sick and tired of stupid wars that don't serve the national interest, that shouldn't have been fought, that caused damage and death to people all around the world, and the casualties to my own brothers and sisters in arms. So I was all about no stupid wars. Unfortunately, some of Trump's employees weren't. But here's what he had to say on what his concept was about stupid wars.
Suburban women. You know what they want? We got a lot of suburban women. You know what they want? They want peace. They want low taxes. They want good education. They don't want wars, these stupid wars that go on forever, killing everybody.
And in case anyone is wondering what Trump thinks about those people in government now, whether he had these specific 2 authors in mind, I can't say, but I can sure say that he describes them well when he said this.
World War III has never been closer than it is right now. We need to clean house of all of the warmongers and America last globalists and the deep state, the Pentagon, the State Department, and the national security industrial complex. One of the reasons I was the only president in generations who didn't start a war is that I was the only president who rejected the catastrophic advice of many of Washington's generals, bureaucrats, and the so-called diplomats who only know how to get us into conflict, but they don't know how to get us out.
Man, is that last statement so true? They know how to get us into trouble. They don't know how to get us out. What Pompeo and Pence are recommending there is a surefire way to get us into a war, and absolutely no vision, not even addressed anywhere in here, is how to get us out of it. Now, what they want to claim is that that's deterrence, as I put in that first call out there. He says, no, this will deter them. Like we'll go in there and just spank them really hard and they'll just tuck their tail and run. That's nonsense. Have you not been paying attention for the last 2 decades of our activities in the Middle East and in that region? When does that ever cause any of these folks to back down? It always has the opposite effect. I was in Afghanistan on 2 of my 4 combat deployments, and I personally saw it. One in 2004, I'm sorry, 2005, 6, and then the other one is 2010 and 11. And the dramatic difference I saw between the two, and everything I studied in between now and then, showed graphically on the ground that every time we put more troops there, the violence ticked up. So then we would put more troops in and bring more violence. And then the violence on that Taliban picked up, their numbers picked up. And then finally in 2009, Obama goes in with a big surge and said, well, this way we'll go in way big, even not just incremental, but heck of a lot larger. That will bring them to heel. And what happened? I mean, I don't have to tell you, you guys watch this channel are very smart, so you know what happened. The Taliban continued to expand. No matter how many we killed, they always grew until finally the corruption and the incapacity in the Afghan government and military just collapsed. And then we ended up having to leave in shame and humiliation as the Taliban watched us from the hills of Kabul as the last plane of Americans left, and they are in power to this day. How good did that work out, Mike Pompeo? Do you have no memory of what you helped orchestrate? I mean, you helped lay the foundation for all of that nonsense. And yet you want to turn a blind eye and say, well, okay, well, even though everything in the last 2 decades didn't work, even though it didn't work when we took out Muammar Gaddafi, even though it didn't work, we took out Saddam Hussein, and we had this explosion of an insurgency for 5 or 7 years after that. We're going to try it again because maybe this time it'll work. Even though every time we have hit Iran hard, like when we assassinated Soleimani during Pompeo's time in office, that had catastrophic results or terrible results for us in that the Iranians launched 16 precision-guided missiles on American bases and wiping out entire building complexes and wounding seriously 100 Americans. And only by the grace of God did none of those die, because then Trump would almost certainly have come under pressure to respond back into Iran then, and then the escalation would have went up. We may already have been at war. Thank God Trump resisted that and didn't do it. But now Pompeo is not satisfied with that. He has this lust for war with Iran, has for many, many years, and now he's trying to compel the Biden administration to go in there. Look, let's continue on here. The next thing that they talk about is they have the audacity of blaming this current spate of violence on the war between Hamas and Israel, as though Hamas attacked because of our lack of deterrence or some nonsense like that. He is oblivious to decades of extraordinary circumstances between Hamas, between the Palestinian people and the Israeli people, and everything that happened in the summer before 10/7 exploded up. I mean, he is either absurd, he's lying, or he's incapable. I don't know which it is, but we're not stupid. You're not stupid. You know that there was all kinds of things going on between Israel and Hamas, between Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel proper that led up to this explosion. Much of it was avoidable. We now know for sure that Netanyahu's policies over his 2 decades in power expressly tried to keep Hamas on life support. He didn't want to get rid of them. He wanted to keep them at least a little bit alive so that they could be seen as someone who's against Israel that would prevent him from ever doing a 2-state solution. That made it easy for him. That's a fact. That's out there. That's not Hamas propaganda. That is a demonstrable reality. It's anywhere. You can Google that, look on Western sources. You don't have to look on the other side. That's the fact. Anyone who's willing to look can know that. But Biden, Pompeo, and and Pence want to blame that on Biden. Now, to be fair, Biden is not without blame here. Some of the things they've done since they've been in power have done nothing to solve this problem. They've been bumbling militarily. They have been unwilling to move the troops out of Afghanistan, or out of Syria, out of Iraq, as we've argued several times should have been the case, which would have removed the vulnerability that we have, which would have eliminated even the possibility that these Iran-backed groups could have attacked our troops and could have killed those 3. So that's the truth of it. Pompeo didn't do anything in his time. Pence didn't do anything in their time to encourage President Trump to get those troops out of there when he had the chance and the power. I regret that Trump didn't do that. I hope if he gets back into power again, he does it on the other side, because Trump does seem focused on avoiding stupid wars. There is no gain for us here at all. Then it gets worse. Let's go back down a little bit further. So it's true, based on what I've just told you, that they really don't know what they're doing, or they're lying to you. I don't know. But because there's one person that's responsible for that war between Hamas and Israel, and that is Hamas, because they had this horrific terrorist attack on the 7th of October, and then unleashed holy hell. And now the other part, and then here's where we get into some of the more complicated parts. Now then, the U.S. government has some responsibility too, because Israel over responded in a way that's now harmful to their interest, and it's harmful to American interest. And it is a lie to say that. Well, actually, no. Let me let Pompeo speak for himself, and then I'll tell you where the lie comes. Here's what he had to say about what happened.
The Iranians are willing to fight to the last Houthi, right? They won't see this as something that impacts them directly. Every missile, every rocket that's fired on an American is an Iranian-made, Iranian intellectual property, Iranian-trained soldier. This is all Iran-backed. And the Houthis are no more fighting to avenge what happened in Gaza than a man in the moon. They are fighting because the Iranians have put them up to this. And so that's the place we're going to have to go.
Oh, sure. No more than the man in the moon, no relation to it all. It can't be that they never did anything in this regard ever, even though in 10 years of war with Saudi Arabia, until the Israelis attacked into the Gaza Strip and started killing thousands upon thousands of innocent Palestinians. And then they expressly said, because of this, and we can't do anything against Israel, we don't have the power to reach, but we can knock things out in the Red Sea and make things difficult for Iran and for Israel and the United States. So that's what they've done. Every time they attack, they expressly say that's what happened. And you can't say that, even though it didn't even start until November, so well over a month after the invasion by Israel into the Gaza Strip started, and it's just lying and thinking you're stupid. They're treating you, Pompeo and Pence, as you're stupid, that you don't get that none of this happened until the Israelis went into the Palestinian areas of Gaza and started killing large numbers of them. It's oblivious that only since the 17th of October, 10 days after that, when Israel went in there, then there was this explosion of these attacks against the U.S. troops in Iraq and in Syria after Israel went in. Every time they strike, they expressly tie the one to the other. So it is disingenuous, or they're treating you like you're stupid and you don't know anything. But in any case, he keeps going back to the answer is more power. More power. More. Let's bomb them some more. Let's see. I think one of the things he said was, instead of solving this problem with wisdom, diplomacy, and the targeted and effective use of military power, and all of those tools have to be used. So I'm not some peacenik that just says, well, just talk to them and everything will be fine. No, I'm saying when it's necessary to use some power, use some power. I was an advocate when our troops were killed that we should go after the people that killed our troops and kill them. Unequivocal. There's never been an asterisk. I've never said anything besides that. Repeat it again to this day. If you kill an American troop, whether they should be there or not, you're going to die. No questions asked. But then we have to add the wisdom and the diplomacy in. How can we work with the various groups in the area to avoid escalation, to avoid getting sucked into a war that should never be fought? There is no reason whatsoever for American national security, for our economic prosperity, and security in the region that we should ever seek to go into a war, which is what Pompeo and Pence are doing. They, folks, are seeking a war because the very things they advocate are literal definition acts of war. And they hope that it would cause the Iranians to back down. But that's not going to happen. It's going to, almost the exact opposite is almost guaranteed to happen, because all of their track record shows they don't back down. They escalate, they retaliate, they seek revenge, and then what? So Pompeo didn't answer any questions of that. If his hoped for outcome doesn't happen, then what? What do you recommend, Mr. Secretary of State? What do you recommend, Mr. Vice President? Then what? What are you going to do if instead of backing down, they kill more Americans in retaliation? Fair question, don't you think? I don't see any answers. All I hear is crickets coming from them. They don't want to talk about that. No, just more launches of military weapons. But Pompeo thinks it's going to be deterrence. Here's what he has to say on that.
Every morning when I would wake up, when I was the CIA director or Secretary of State, I was thinking about were my folks in my embassy safe, were my guys on the ground at the CIA safe. This was a central focus of what we did. It's one of the reasons we wanted to ensure we had deterrence. We did pretty damn good work for 4 years, and now we've lost that very deterrence that we had built up in the Trump administration. And I fear that we're not at the end of this. We are simply just at the beginning.
And man, do I hope we are at the end of that kind of nonsense and not at the beginning. Now, I don't know who's going to win the next presidential election. Obviously, that's still up in the air, and that's up to people like you, depending on who you're going to vote for. If President Biden or if President Trump returns to the White House, I only hope to God that he repeats, that he lives by the adage that he said before and recognizes people like Pence and people like Pompeo are trying to undercut what he stands for and instead are seeking wars. Gary, if you can play that second clip again that we had about Biden from Trump saying what his views really are.
World War III has never been closer than it is right now. We need to clean house of all of the warmongers and America last globalists in the deep state, the Pentagon, the State Department, and the national security industrial complex. One of the reasons I was the only president in generations who didn't start a war is that I was the only president who rejected the catastrophic advice of many of Washington's generals, bureaucrats, and the so-called diplomats who only know how to get us into conflict, but they don't know how to get us out.
I want to get rid of the warmongers and the so-called diplomats who only know how to get us into wars, not how to get us out. I'm telling you, this is how. Don't put those guys back in office. If you are reelected, Mr. Trump, I hope that you live by those words and don't let those kinds of people in there, because that would completely undercut you again. And that's what happened in the first time. Let's hope that it doesn't happen in the next time. Let these things also, folks, guide you when you go to the ballot box this coming November. Let's don't elect somebody who's either going to do nothing or is going to actually seek war. And if you do vote for Trump, I hope that you make your point known, whether on social media or elsewhere. Don't put these warmongers back in your cabinet. Let's get guys who have your vision to keep America safe, to take care of our troops, to get our troops out of these pointless deployments in the Middle East. Trump wanted to get us out of Iraq, out of Syria, and he wanted to get us out of Afghanistan before he left office in there. And I know for a fact, because I know some of the people who were in his administration, that those intents were actually thwarted by members of his own administration and people within there. Now, I wish that Trump had been stronger and had overruled them, but there was so many other things going on and he didn't do it. So it doesn't matter. That's just not what happened. But I know that was his intent. And so I hope that on a second term, if he gets elected, that he now learns from those lessons, puts the right people in key places who then employ his views on foreign policy. Because ultimately, if we get people like Pompeo back in any sort of office, or if President Biden gives in to the pressure that so many of these people have and actually uses force on Iran, nothing but bad things are going to happen. Let me reiterate that and leave you with this. If we attack Iran proper, if we go against their forces because of what has happened elsewhere in the theater, even though we don't do anything to stop it, it's going to be bad for America. The chances of them being deterred are almost non-existent. The likelihood of expansion is almost certain. That's the reality, and that's the truth. No matter what people with these kinds of titles and past have, they were wrong then, they're wrong now. And that is your deep dive for today. Thank you very much. We're going to ask you to join us next week because we got some great ones. We got Doug McGregor back, one of our favorites. You are definitely not going to want to miss that on Monday. We'll be publishing out what that's coming in. We also have some issues on the possible war between China and Taiwan, or China and the U.S. over Taiwan also on Monday. You're going to want to watch that too, because we spend so much time on these current wars. I don't want to miss that one, because that's also got a great deal of influence and potential for our national security going forward. Thanks. Be sure to like and subscribe. And remember, we remain unintimidated and uncompromised to bring you the truth, no matter what it is, no matter whose toes it steps on or whose feelings it might hurt, like former secretaries of state or vice president. If you deserve the truth, and we're going to bring it to you. Thanks, and we'll see you next time on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.